Yeah, so as you saw by the video title, the Tercel's getting a new engine. The first part will be covering the plan thus far for this project. First thing I needed to do was choose an engine. Being that the Tercel uses Toyota's A family for engines, I decided to stick to that engine family to make things easier. The first limiting factor is, does the new engine use a 6-bolt flywheel? If yes, it'll work. If the engine uses an 8-bolt flywheel, it can still be done, but more work will be involved. So with that in mind, I started brainstorming. The most common and easiest swap to do in these Tercels is the 4AC swap. What makes this swap so easy is it's pretty much a bolt-in swap that nets not only about a 20 horsepower improvement, but also better fuel economy. The 3AC and 4AC are almost identical siblings, minus a larger displacement and combustion chamber design. Seems like the way to go, right? Wrong. The problem with this swap is that in my province, Nova Scotia, I was having a lot of trouble tracking a 4AC down, and even if I found one, it would need a lot of work. The next option I looked to was using the revered 4AGE. The main problem with swapping one of these in is that only very early examples of these motors use a 6-bolt flywheel. That being said, there is a way around that. The 3AC and 4AGE share the same stroke length, so I could swap the 3AC crankshaft into a 4AGE to keep the transmission compatible. The only issue with that is there may be some differences in the strength of the crank, which may limit how far the engine could rev. There is actually a junkyard near me that has a couple 4AGEs, but they have been sitting out in the elements for some time, so they would require a lot of time and energy. This led me to my final two options, the 4A-FE or 7A-FE. Both use 6-bolt flywheels, both are very common, and both have been swapped into Tercels before, meaning I have a backlog of info to fall back onto for answers. These engines can both be easily found in 1993 to 1997 Corollas, so with that I picked up a donor car. This here is a 1997 Corolla DX. Or so I thought. I bought this car thinking this would have the more desirable 7A-FE, but as it turns out, it has had some body parts replaced, and it's actually a Corolla CE, which means it has the 4A-FE. Either way, I was still going to use the engine, so this doesn't really matter a whole lot. So now that we have the backstory out of the way, let's get into the plan and some tech talk. So being that the 3AC and 4A-FE were mounted differently in both cars, our first two problems are the intake and exhaust manifolds. Originally, the exhaust runs out of the 3AC on the passenger side, because the 3AC is a reverse flow head. The 4A-FE, on the other hand, is a cross flow head. So that means once the 4A-FE is in the Tercel, the exhaust will need to run on the driver's side, which means I'll need to custom make some tubing to clear the steering shaft and starter. The intake manifold is another story, however. I can go about this in two ways. I could use the original intake and do a hacked up tubing route, or go custom. In this case, I decided to go all out and will be using one of these ITB kits from SMR2U. This will keep the intake simple and also help make for extra space on the intake side of the engine. The next problem to overcome is the oil pan. If I try using the factory 4A-FE oil pan, it will not clear the cross member or the front differential. Thankfully, with some slight modifications, I can make the 3AC oil pan fit. What I'll need to do is graft the top of the 4A-FE pan to the 3AC pan. The next problem is engine management. I could try to use the stock ECU from the Corolla, but the donor car is an automatic, so this may bring up some problems in the future. So instead, I decided to go with the Link G4X Atomex ECU. Along with that, I'll also need an O2 sensor controller from Innovative to give the Link ECU the correct signaling for the O2 sensor. This leads into the next problem. As it turns out, the distributor on the 4A-FE sticks out too far when swapped into the Tercel. There's two ways to get around this. The first method is to simply cut into the firewall and make room, like seen here, or I could convert to a coil-on plug setup. This is what I decided to go for because I'd rather not cut up my Tercel. This will add a bit more challenge and cost to the swap, but I think it's worth it. Thankfully, after doing some research, I found that the factory crank angle sensor will work with the Link ECU in order to fire the coil packs. But I also need a cam angle sensor signal to get this done. Turns out inside the factory distributor elides the cam angle sensor, so I'll need to keep part of the distributor to make this all work. What I need to find out is if there is a cover plate available to cap off the reduced distributor. If not, I'll be making one. Finally, I'll be using coil packs from a 2006 Corolla I had laying around. Thankfully, these have been used many times before for this conversion, so I have info to look back onto for help. So that's the plan now. This series will be kind of spread out over time, as this project will take a while to complete, as I want to get it all right the first time. I hope you look forward to seeing what's to come for this project, and until next time, peace out.
The motherfucking world is a ghetto, full of magazines, full clips, and heavy metal when the smoke settles. I'm just looking for a big yellow. It's 6-inch stilettos, Dr. Dre. Hello. Percolating, keep 'em waiting while you sitting there hating. Your bitch is hyperventilating, hoping that we penetrating. You get snating, cause I never been to Satan. But hardcore administrating, gangbang affiliating. MC Winner had you wildin' off a zone and a whole half a gallon. Get the dialing, 911 emergency. You can tell him it's my son, he's hurting me and he's a felon. On parole for robbery, ain't no copping a plea, ain't no stopping a G. I'm in the 6, you got to hop in the 3. Company monopoly.